listening to New Hampshire Now on WKXL, airing live weekdays at 10 a.m. and re-airing weeknights at 6 p.m. and Sundays at noon.
Welcome back on New Hampshire Now on WKXL 1450 and ConcordNewsRadio.com. I am Chris Ryan. Thanks so much for joining us. The program, we're at the Barley House, joined by Congressman Ron Paul, who's been a frequent guest in the program. We're so excited to be joined by him once again here in Concord. And Dr. Paul, welcome back.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be with you again.
So some people they open up an office, and there's a couple people show up, a couple of volunteers, campaign staff, and you had hundreds of people outside your campaign office that you opened, and I think that speaks dramatically to the excitement around your candidacy, and we've highlighted this pretty much throughout the process. You've been given no credit by the mainstream media, but continue to grow grassroots support, and that's equaled dollars, and it's equaled pretty good standing in the polls.
Yes, and we're very pleased with it, and we don't know exactly why we don't get the big national interviews, but, what counts is whether the people show up, and I guess there's methods of communication. Maybe there's radio, and maybe there's internet, and there's different ways of communicating with people, so evidently the message is getting out, and I, of course, emphasize the message. I think it's a powerful message, and I think a lot of people are attracted to it.
And we're going to talk more about that in a second, but I think it's been a disgrace the way the mainstream media has treated your campaign. If you're going to go to Ames, Iowa, and you're going to cover it the way that they did and blanket the coverage, and Michelle Bachmann beats you by 150 votes, and your son said we needed to have our grandkids outside a couple more Walmarts to rake in the 150 votes needed to win, but you're pretty much neck and neck, and she's viewed as a hands-down winner, and you haven't been mentioned at all. Why do you think that is? What stands out at you, the reasoning why you've not received the recognition you deserve in this?
Well, the truth is I don't know, but you asked me what do I think, so I guess I can think.
Yeah.
I would think that it's a message that they're not anxious to spread because it's a different message. I challenge the status quo. I challenge both parties. And, when I talk about economics, I don't just say, Obama's a bad guy. I talk about how the Republicans have made mistakes. When I talk about the Federal Reserve, that's a bipartisan issue, and both parties have long time supported it for different reasons. Some like to finance and monetize the money spent for entitlements. The others like to do it on the war issue. And I challenge them on the foreign policy, and there's a lot of special interests that are served that way. And my guess would be, don't give this guy any credit. He could take off, and I think they are very concerned and worried about that.
You also poll very well nationally. You're matched up against the president. I want to ask you about a fellow Texan in Rick Perry, who we met with last weekend, and I was very impressed upon meeting with him. He's great one-on-one. He has the campaign abilities that will, I think, translate well to New Hampshire. When you look at him, though, on the issues, you're an individual who has a very, very good view of him, having both of you been from Texas. What do you see from Rick Perry, and what do you think of his candidacy?
Well, I don't know him personally. I don't recall ever meeting him. I think he has a very good chance to do well because he's part of what people are looking for, image-wise. But I think he will not interfere with our campaign because I think he blends in with the others. He's a variation of the others, protecting the status quo. So I don't think that will be much of a challenge. But his background is quite a bit different than mine, on emphasis on the issues. So I think when that comes out and what he supported in Texas and how the Tea Party people think about him, all that information will come out in time during this campaign.
Is there anything particular that he did in Texas that concerns you? Whether it's HPV,
yeah, a lot. I mean, the HPV issue, mandating by executive orders, inoculations, that's really disturbing to me. He really revamped the way we finance, although, there's economic points to make of how well we do in Texas compared to others, but he's the first one to really embark on deep bond and commitments for our highways. We used to pay as we went along, so that is different. And so I think there was in the last election we had a candidate in the race, and Deborah Medina got about 20% of the vote.
Libertarian candidate.
Well, she was a Republican. She what we classify as a Tea Party candidate, but she didn't have any money hardly, and she got 20% of the vote. So that's a 20% solid vote that we're concerned about his conservative credentials.
That's Congressman Ron Paul, and you talked about the Federal Reserve before it was popular to talk about the Federal Reserve. Now every candidate is talking about it, and his comments were heavily criticized and there was some innocuous presence within his statements. What did you think of his comments, and what about all the candidates now talking about what needs to be done with the Federal Reserve?
Well, I think it's delightful that they're talking about it. I mean, they really can't steal my thunder, so to speak, but it shows that these views are very important, that monetary issues are important, and the grassroots are thinking about it. And periodically, I'm convinced throughout history that the money issue becomes the key issue, and we're on the verge of, I think, making the money issue, or the events are making the money issue so key, because of the financial market. So I think that's a very important issue. So I'm delighted when they're bringing up these subjects of the Federal Reserve.
How about the almost treasonous aspect of it? And that's something that I could envision Ron Paul saying. It's almost treasonous to spend more money when considering how far we're in debt. Is that a fair statement?
No, I wouldn't use it, because I work real hard. I don't even like talking about the other candidates when you're making me do it.
That's how we roll.
So, no, I don't like to bring it up and say I'm, even like it's popular to say I'm running against Obama, I can get Obama and all that, because I think in terms of economic policies and fallacies and monetary policy and foreign policy and all these things. So I try real hard to ask Bernanke very important, pressing questions about monetary policy, but I don't usually. People say, well, you want to get rid of Bernanke? It doesn't matter a whole lot.
In terms of transparency, and the Federal Reserve in the past has been really no access to them or understanding what's going on. Has Bernanke been more transparent in your estimation than previous Federal Reserve chairmen? Does he actually kind of open things up a little bit more, not perhaps to your liking, but
under pressure from the public and from us, and the people are demanding more. And there were some audits last year, not my audit, Bill, but we got some audits and we found out a lot. They're very unhappy about that. But he's held a couple press conferences now, so he's responding. And I think it says something about our system. As much as we complain about the system, it's still pretty good that you can go and put public pressure on people, and they feel they have to respond, and yet they've never had to do that before. They've been in business for nearly 100 years, and they've never had to tell us a thing. But this bailout is something else. I mean, they were churning around about $15 trillion with no obligation to tell us anything. A third of it going to foreign central banks and foreign banks. So this is an issue that's seen the light of day, and I think that it's very good that he's had to come clean and tell us a little bit, but we need to know a lot more.
When we met down in Washington, you were excited about your chances, but you were somewhat hesitant about where the campaign would end. Are you starting to see signs now that you can be confident that you have a shot to win the nomination, considering how strongly you polled in the straw poll out in Iowa, though it's in the big scheme of things inconsequential? Are you starting to feel that you can win this?
More so than ever, because you always are hopeful and say you can. It looks like we will, and it'll keep growing. But with the opening that we had here last night, with the fundraising way it's going and the way people are talking about monetary issues, and I think there's a lot more attention given to, well, if we have to cut, maybe we ought to cut some of that overseas spending and change our approach to maintaining this world empire. So I would say that we're making great progress, and it seems to come, in a big spurt. For years you might be laying the groundwork, and people are listening but not knowing who's out there, and all of a sudden when the problems get worse, whether it's being in Afghanistan too long or we have a monetary crisis, all of a sudden those people, I've been thinking about that, I knew there was something wrong. All of a sudden there's a groundswell. And I think that's what we're seeing now. The answer is yes. I am pleasantly surprised that this is happening, and I think it puts us in a much better position.
To me, your message has taken off to such a great degree, because you look at Democrats and liberals discussing, we need to I'm claiming they're conservatives, they're fiscal conservatives. Paul Hodes ran for Senate in the last race, was claiming he's a fiscal conservative, and everybody is on board with the spending has to be cut. So the message is there, and people understand, and America is demanding. How do you get it to the next step? Obviously, electing you as president would be one of the things, but that's the final question. How do you get to the next step where dramatic change actually takes place in regards to spending, and where do we go from here?
Get more people to hear the message, get more people to understand why it's important, get people to believe once again that markets work and freedom works, and you can have prosperity more likely when the government is spending less of your money. And when that is a prevailing attitude, the members of Congress aren't aren't all that philosophic. And you say, well, they're always running around and doing these things, but they're responding to their constituency. The constituencies for decades now have wanted more welfare and entitlement system and all these things that government provides, and they've never said a word about fighting these wars. You know, they've endorsed them. But so you have to get the people that will remove their endorsement, and the Washington will change. So it's good to think about Washington. We must change them, and we have to have leaders there to help change it. But ultimately, you have to get the people to understand that the changes necessary will be, how big is their appetite for government? And is it worthwhile to continue trying to feed them with big government? Because quite frankly, I don't think it's possible to solve our problems that way.
Dr. Paul, as always, I want to thank you for joining us for the program. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
This is Congressman Ron Paul joining us here at the Farley House. Back with more on After Now.